to the premiere of Operation Jericho Project Radio, where we will be blowing the horns of truth in order to bring down the walls of government-run education system. Our goal for this show is to bring you the hardcore truth about what's really happening to our children in the government indoctrination system we call public education. We are also going to pull back the curtain on all things Common Core. On Operation Jericho Project Radio, you'll get truth and information you won't hear anywhere else. There certainly isn't going to be anything PC about us. We're pulling off the gloves and exposing the evil agendas that are being thrust on our children in the name of education. Parents, understand when you send your kids off to school to learn the 3 R's, the reality of what they are learning is not reading, writing, and arithmetic, but earth worship and animal rights over human rights, evolution, global warming, climate change, sustainable development, social justice, sex ed, alcohol ed, drug ed, and death ed, all socialist goals. Our children have been through values clarification, outcome-based education, mastery learning, no child left behind, race to the top, and now Common Core, all federal programs that have failed our children. Time for solutions, and that is exactly what Operation Jericho Project offers. We will be bringing you solutions and alternatives. That is the mission of Operation Jericho Project, to involve pastors, parents, grandparents, community businesses, community leaders, etc., to step up and stand in the gap for our nation's children and help Operation Jericho rescue our children from the indoctrination through so-called education. We will talk about all this and so much more in our shows, so we hope you will join us often to learn what your options to this insidious agenda are. You can also go to our website at www.operationjerichoproject.com to follow much of what we will discuss today and in the future. So let's get underway. I'm your host, Christina Mikas, founder of Operation Jericho, and I'm joined today by my co-host and Operation Jericho Project leadership team member, Angela Bean. And our special guest today is Mary Black. Welcome, Mary.
Welcome. I am so glad to be with you all this afternoon.
Well, we're just happy to have you, Mary. And Mary is with Freedom Project Education and is also a member of Operation Jericho Project. Mary has so much to share with us today about solutions and alternatives to government education. But we'll get into all that in a few minutes. First, let me bring in Angela and Mary for a little discussion on the who's, what's, and whys of Operation Jericho Project, and then we'll get into the solutions and alternatives. Hi, Mary. I already said that, but Angela's not on yet, so we're waiting for her to call in. I keep texting her.
Shall we go ahead and start with a prayer, and then we can go right on into Freedom Project? Nothing like starting with the solution and the good news.
That's right. We'll start with the solutions first since Angela's not on. So let's go ahead and get underway, Mary. You want to open us in prayer? Let's dedicate this show to the Lord.
Absolutely. My favorite prayer, one that is applicable to us all, because our Lord himself taught us this prayer, is the Our Father. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.
Amen and amen. Well, Mary, why don't you share? This is so exciting to have you join us for the launch of our new radio show, Operation Jericho Project's Radio. And so I want to get right into the meat of why we exist and what we want to accomplish and why we've come to this point. So you want to share a little bit of the audience, Mary, what brought you to the point of where you are?
Yes, I certainly, I joined Operation Jericho because I firmly believe that the only way we are going to solve our problems is truthfully by turning to God and bringing our children back to God. After being in education now, I'm in my 41st year as an educator. I realize that since we have taken God out of the schools, we have lost the souls of so many children. And it is time to insist that we put God back in schools. And I'm not sure. I seriously doubt we could do so in the public schools, but we need to find alternative education opportunities for our children that do teach them about God and uphold God.
Boy, amen to that, Mary. Angela, there you are.
Well, ladies, I'm sorry for the technical difficulties, but I'm glad you got us back on the air.
Well, it's going to take more than the devil to try to stop us here.
Amen to that.
Amen to that. So we've already opened in prayer, Angela, and Mary was just saying a little bit about what brought her to the point to Freedom Project Education and why,
wonderful,
how we got to this point. And you might want to share a bit, Angela, your on how did we get to this point that we developed Operation Jericho, Freedom Project Education, and all of this. What brought us to this point to where we said enough is enough?
Well, Christina, just like you and Mary, we have all been citizen activists. Common Core raised its ugly head in 2010, and it came onto our radar screen. And as good citizen activists following the rules that have been established by man, we all got out there and started begging and pleading our state legislators to get us out of it. And as we were in the legislative, we continued to do our research and learn more and more about what Common Core national standards were really all about, and we discovered some startling truths that you laid out in the beginning of the show, that this is just really the end game of a 100-year progression of the government taking control of the education of our children. But meanwhile, we're fighting those battles in the legislature, right? We're dutiful, good civic citizens, and we went through 2 legislative sessions in 2013 and 2014 trying to get these legislators to do the right thing. Most states were unsuccessful. I know here in Georgia we were. And so, Christina, you and I got together last summer in the middle of all of this because we both were introduced to a video called Indoctrination that was produced by Colin Gunn and Joaquin Fernandez with executive producer Pastor E. Ray Moore. And so I tracked down Pastor Moore and talked to him about his video, because when I watched the video, first thought that came to my mind was, we're not going to win these battles in the legislature, not at the federal level and not at the state level. We have got to take this to the church. And so I called Pastor Moore, had a lengthy discussion with him, and he lives in South Carolina, and he has a website called Exodus Mandate. And so after a conversation, a 3-way conversation with you and myself and Pastor Moore, we launched the Operation Jericho Project, because we realized it's going to take the only demographic large enough in this nation to rescue our children, that's the Christian community, and we felt like we had to take this to the church.
That's right. You know, there's a reason why we've not become successful in our legislatures. And I think, that's something we need to point out to the audience as well, that, about ALEC, the American Legislative and Exchange Council. Mary fought bitterly in Indiana, and she's well aware of, how the legislatures, we can't reach them anymore. And that's what maybe we need to just briefly touch on that today, why we can't seem to reach them throughout, things like ALEC, and let people know what that is, so they'll know when they're fighting what they need to look for.
Well, we have a prime example of what ALEC is doing right here in Indianapolis. Today and tomorrow, 3 legislators from each of the states is meeting at our state house, not more than about 15 minutes from where I am, to discuss and plan a constitutional convention. This is their second meeting. The first one was held at Mount Vernon, of all places, on December 7th of last year.
It's almost blasphemy, isn't it?
Oh,
and
yeah.
And you know, Mary, many conservatives believe that the American Legislative Exchange Council is a group of individuals, mainly conservatives, who are there to create model legislation to benefit conservative initiatives. Unfortunately, as I learned when I was uncovering the ties to Common Core, that most of the legislation that trickles down into our state houses is not coming from we the people. In fact, if you have a piece of legislation that you've gotten together your local legislator that is going to restore liberty or prevent our liberties from being taken away, more than likely you're not going to have a lot of success in having that passed. But most of the bills, the model legislation that trickles down from the top, from the American Legislative Exchange Council, our legislators apparently are getting their marching orders, and these bills pass through so fast we citizens can't keep up with it. And I refer to it as playing the whack-a-mole game. These bills come in so fast you can't whack down one piece of legislation before another one is popping up. But who the Legislative Council is, ALEC, they have about a third of their membership are conservative Republican legislators at both the state and congressional level. And then the other two-thirds of the body, and correct me if I'm wrong, but these are corporate interests, the major corporations, the CEOs and those lobbyists for the corporations, and they actually hire attorneys to draft model legislation. And they're focused on our children. They want to train our children for their workforce, and that's sort of where many of the bills that are coming through to support the Common Core standards, such as career pathways and mandates for online learning and shutting down our traditional schools to establish alternative charter schools. These are initiatives coming from ALEC.
Yes, and the charters are, that's the whole point of the charters. That's the Trojan horse of Common Core, which we'll get into that as well, because that's really something everyone needs to understand is the charters and all school choice, what they call school choice charters. That will be corporate-led. So understand that your corporations are looking to lifelong learning for lifelong labor. No longer will your kids be educated. They'll be trained to do labor workforce. And that you'll hear them talk about that, workforce labor or school to work or things like that, those buzzwords. That's all coming. That's all coming in this corporatocracy that they're going to establish through charter schools. And then that's how they're going to get rid of the school boards, and things like that, school superintendents, where you'll no longer have parental input. They'll do regionalism. Regionalism goes back to sustainable development and all of this kind of stuff, which is what they're teaching the kids. So,
exactly.
And then you will have parental input whatsoever, because it will all be controlled by regions, no longer local. So that's another thing that we need to get into, and we'll be getting into all of these topics in great detail in upcoming shows. But today, because Mary is on a tight schedule, we want to get right into Operation Jericho was basically created to combat this. We have got to do something to rescue our kids from this indoctrination. It's no longer education. And you'll come to know that when you listen to many of our shows. But we're now working on solutions. We know enough of the problems. It's time to put out solutions. And Mary has a project, Freedom Project Education, that is one of the most awesome solutions I've seen to this dilemma. And so, Mary, if you don't mind, would you share a little bit about Freedom Project Education?
I am always so glad to do it, and I'm going to preface my statement by saying there are very few things. I retired in the spring of 2010, anticipating a nice, quiet retirement. And 5 months later, I began working for Freedom Project Education as its director of curriculum. Freedom Project Education enticed me. The position just kind of called my name because it was an ideal fit. It was a classical education program. It was Christian-based. and to be entrenched with our Judeo-Christian heritage. What more could you want for children? After 40 years of seeing education deteriorate to the point that I no longer recognized my profession or even enjoyed it, this was indeed a solution. What we offer is an alternative, a hybrid, if you will, for the parents who want to pull their children out of school but don't want to take on the full responsibility of teaching. So we developed a program where the teachers and the parents are partners. The parents have their rightful position as the educator. The teachers provide expert education. They're all qualified in their areas of instruction. And the blending of the two together ends up being a hybrid of a brick-and-mortar classroom right in the student's very home with the parent at the controls. Mm-hmm. And indeed, wonderful things have happened. We have we started with 22 students, and right now we have 480 students and waiting list for, I think, about 4 or 5 of our classes. And our elementary program has increased by 150% from just last year. So that's kind of a synopsis. Some of the courses that we offer, and classical education can mean so many different things to in this day. It's a common label. What we mean by classical education is an education that is similar to the type and style of education that our founders received. When you look at a generation who prized independence, who recognized God as the source of all rights, not the government, and who knew how to think, were well educated, not just in one area. In what we see today, from school to work, the children get put on a track and they're just set apart to do whatever at a very early age. Our founders were truly educated, so it wasn't hard to find a generation whose education we wanted to look at. So our education, of course, has the usual, the study of English, the study of mathematics, the study of science, the study of history. In the spirit, we tell the history as it is. We don't revise it. The warts and the good stuff.
As it's being revised today in our public education system, history is being completely revised. So understand this. Go ahead, Mary.
Absolutely. We use if you want to know the history that our high school students study, it is the Clarence Carson series. It's a set of 6 volumes. It's the basic history of the United States. And so we divide it into 3 years, two volumes per year. And along with that, to encourage more in-depth study so that they truly know the history and the primary founding documents of our country. We pair the study of U.S. history with a course that is unique to us. It's called American Studies. And in American Studies, they actually study Bastiat's Law. I challenge the listeners to pick up the book Bastiat's Law. It's only 70-some pages. And Bastiat wrote this in the 1830s when the French Revolution was showing the same things that we're seeing now, the socialism. And Bastiat spotted it and talked about it. It's a fascinating read. I recommend it highly. Our freshmen study that. They studied the democracy. Alex de Tocqueville the democracy in America, because he was a Frenchman in the 1840s who came to see why the United States, such a young country, was blooming and growing so fast. And just things like this. And then, of course, in the junior year, that series would not be complete without a thorough and absolute study of the Constitution, along with the Federalist and the Anti-Federalist papers. So that's just a taste.
So what's sad, Mary, is that our kids today couldn't even begin to pass probably third or fourth grade level of our kids back when education first started, when it was really education.
Oh, I'm sure of it. Not to embarrass anybody, but as we all agreed, and you said at the opening, the gloves are coming off. The students that we are getting from public schools and some private schools. We have begun doing placement testing to better place our students in the right courses, and sadly it has been some students have had to be lowered two grades from where they thought they should be, and it's not their fault. They just haven't been taught.
That's what we're hearing. That's what we're hearing a lot is. One of our team members, Debbie, you know her, Mary. She's
yes.
She's very involved in helping, and that's what she sees. She goes to the church to help homeschool, and that's what she sees. These kids that come out of the public education system, they don't know how to read. They can't do math. I mean, you're literally having to tutor them so that you can start educating them.
Right. And I am finding in the math placement test, we're finding that the students are so confused about how to do basic problems that it's like, the math, the complete logic associated with math has been taken away. And I have to think it's purposeful.
It is, and we
want
have to almost uneducate them. We almost have to uneducate them, Mary, to re-educate them.
Absolutely. In developing the classical model, I did a great deal of study, and the one thing that I found consistently in the studies I made was that the study of in the elementary, meaning K through 6, the study of Latin and math is the great preface for developing logical thinking and preparation for logic courses. And when I started to see it and think it and see it and watch the students who have come through that now for a couple of years, it is ever so true.
Boy, amen to that. Angela, you wanted to say something. I heard you.
Well, as Mary talks about how little our students who come out of the public education system know about history, I took it upon myself to visit my local school district curriculum director of history and social studies, and I encourage every parent out there to do this. If you don't, believe us, go ask the questions. You may think my school district is different. My kids are in great schools. Well, I'm in a school district in Georgia that is long touted as one of the best school districts in the state of Georgia. In fact, that's why my husband and I moved here 30 years ago with our children. But so I visited the curriculum director, and as we're going through the curriculum, and as she's showing me how Georgia standards, say, well, we'll teach the children we're a democracy here and teach them we're a democracy there. And even though I point out, well, we're not a democracy, we're a constitutional republic, and the curriculum director, agrees with me. She says, well, that's true, but, whatever. So as we're teaching them, the wrong history and about the governance of our nation, I learned from the curriculum director that my school district made a policy that there would be no required reading assignment made by the teachers of the students for after-school reading. I found that quite horrifying, and as I asked the curriculum director about that policy, she said, well, you have to understand that many students were not doing their reading assignments, and it made it very difficult for the classroom teacher to know what she needed to teach if some of the students had read it and some of the students had not. And so we just made a policy countywide that there would be no required reading at all, and that made it easier for the classroom teacher. And so parents, you've got to understand that the only history your children are learning is what the teacher can tell them in that 40 minutes of classroom time 5 days a week. And you have to pray that the ideology of that teacher matches up with your ideology and that she knows good, true history herself.
And we know that isn't the case in most classrooms these days. We have good teachers, but they're few and far between.
Well, go ahead, Mary.
Oh, I was just going to add, I'm sorry. I think there may be just a slight delay. I apologize, Angela. I think the teachers today may not be all that bad, but I think what we're seeing is their training. The teachers that we have now have been trained so poorly. And again, I say it is intentionally, because if you want to affect schools, you got to start with the teachers. And I think, in addition to that, their hands have been tied. They can't do anything.
Well, if they do say anything about what's really going on, then they'll get fired. And they can't, they're afraid to lose their jobs, so they sit silently while the children are being destroyed, and that's really sad. Because if we don't have our teachers as our first line of defense for the children, I don't know, what hope there is for the public education. There is no hope if the teachers aren't going to be the first line of defense for the children, and they're the ones literally indoctrinating the children at this point. So it's a real sticky situation. I mean, you've got good teachers out there that don't want to be doing this, and more, I think a lot of them are leaving or finding some alternatives. But if they would only understand that you don't have to be locked into this, teachers. You can come out, and believe me, there are many, many opportunities for you outside of the public education system. So, again, homeschooling situations, co-ops, things like that. So look for those opportunities and become an asset to the children.
Yes, absolutely. Right, if you are really aren't happy in your teaching position, pray to God, make arrangements, have faith, take the leap of faith, as I call it, and find some way to get involved. I recommend that those teachers who have experience volunteer to help those parents who are homeschooling. And some parents would be delighted to have an extra set of hands, and qualified hands at that.
Right, and there's so many ways that, as Operation Jericho, wants to do, is to help people set up, situations where they can offer homeschooling, environments for children. Is get involved because there's that you can set up a system, and then you can actually be the teacher. Bring students to you. Set something up for your. There's nothing to can't do this, and then start homeschooling kids for parents that work. I mean, there's so many creative ways to do this. You don't have to be locked into this system of indoctrination, and especially for Christian teachers. I don't know. I know so many of them are struggling so hard in these schools. We've talked to many of them. We've spoken to many, haven't we, Angela?
Oh. Yes, we certainly have. And, in fact, I had the opportunity to speak to two wonderful teachers last Sunday following a church service, and I was sharing with them the Operation Jericho project before I realized they were teachers. and I was talking about how we really, in order to break this government hold on our schools, because that's what it is. It's a government takeover. It's a corporate government takeover of our children's education, and we're not going to win it legislatively. We've got to move them out. Well, that's when it was revealed by these two ladies that they were teachers, and one of the teachers, Mary, said to me, well, it's all okay in our school where I teach because I have a very Christian school principal, and he allows us to, share our Christian beliefs or talk about the Bible. I'm not sure what all she does in her classroom. But my response to her was, that is awesome that you're doing that in your classroom. But unfortunately, the curriculum, the Common Core standards, the curriculum is based on a secular humanism standard that is in contrary to your Christian beliefs. And while you are maybe trying to overcome that, don't tell anybody what's going on in your school, because before you know it, the Freedom from Religion Foundation will be sending a letter threatening a lawsuit. So,
or the ACU or something like that. They're going to come along. Angela, going back to something that Mary said about classical education, I just want to jump in here because Mary made a point that most people have kind of a different viewpoint of what classical education is, and that word is well overused, so it becomes kind of a non-entity. But you were speaking to someone, Angela, about charter school, and they were saying, but they're going to have classical education.
Well, we know that Hillsdale College is a wonderful Christian university, and their mission is to set up charter schools throughout the nation, teaching the biblical worldview with the classical education and all the fundamentals that Mary has just shared with us of good, true history and skills-based math and the classics of literature and on and on. But unfortunately, the laws in most states don't allow curriculum to be taught in charter schools. Charter schools are taxpayer funded. And in the state of Georgia, they're public schools run by unelected council. Yeah, they're public schools, and they must comply with the educational standards of that state, unless of the state and the state's accountability system. And so when I checked the website of the charter schools for the Hillsdale College, what did I discover? They're complying with the Common Core standards. Mm-hmm. So, parents just need to be aware, do their research when it comes to charter schools.
Yes.
Well, when they say core
I'd like to. Yeah, and I'd like to jump here in here with two comments, if I may. I always learn so much when I speak with you ladies. The first thing I'd like to warn parents is that if your school, you may think you're okay right now, but if your school accepts any federal, that means 1 penny of federal money, and particularly Title I money, you are going to feel the claw of Common Core. You are not going to be able to do as you please, such as the one teacher you spoke with on Sunday. So this has to be clearly understood. You may think things are going along just fine right now, but it's not going to happen. I talk with people from New York and California where the iron claw is being felt, and it's nasty. It is relentless, and it's working its way.
Oh, well, Mary, and that, I'm sorry, Christine, I just want to point out that these teachers in these schools that are not now into the total agenda of Common Core, it's because the assessments have not kicked in. In Georgia, the assessments kick in next year, 2014-2015 school year. aligned to Common Core. And what is so evil about these assessments is that teacher evaluations and school progress have been tied to this. And so this is really is creating that environment for teaching to the test. They will have no time in their class day to teach the classical education any longer because they'll have to focus on the Common Core curriculum. Is that right, Mary?
Absolutely. I spent a day, it was midwinter, and I sacrificed and actually spent 2 weeks in Wisconsin. And one of those days I was privileged to spend with a wonderful kindergarten teacher who obviously loves what she does, loves teaching that age group. And she sorrowfully told me time after time, she said, because of the academic demands, I don't really know my children that well this year. And this was February. And having taught kindergarten myself, I cannot imagine by February not knowing them well enough that they were like my own children. That's kind of the nature of a kindergarten teacher, and to deprive her and the children, it's just unconscionable.
And see, and that's unfortunately what's happening. We've spoken to some teenagers that were in high school, and they were saying it's so cold now to go to school. If the teachers won't help you, and you ask a question and they can't help you because everything is designed to teaching to these tests. And it's not education, it's training.
Right.
And so no longer are the kids being educated, which is why your project is so important, Mary.
Oh, our teachers really, despite being online, really get to know our students so well. I spent 8 weeks teaching first grade during our first semester, and I became so attached to those children. It was incredible. Our elementary program just completed its second year, and it has yet to fail that on that last day of school that I don't get a message. We have an internal instant message system from the teachers to me, and I have yet not to hear from a single elementary teacher that didn't say, the tears are flowing, we're all so sad. It's incredible. And the same with our middle school and high school. I mean, not to the point that they cry, but, there truly is a bond. And that's where education truly happens, is when you bond with your instructor and want to take advantage of that person's the character and the personality and the information that person has.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's what's missing, is that personal relationship, that one-on-one. I know I had it when I was growing up in school, but, of course, I come from the ancient age before all this happened. But still, it is that you have this relationship with your teacher. And that one-on-one help, where you can get help. You can ask your teacher a question. And the schools, they've just radically changed. I was doing a radio show with teenagers, and I'm telling you, I was shocked at the things that they were saying. Absolutely shocked as what's happened to the schools. And we haven't even gotten into the sexualization and the Islamization and the homosexualization and all this stuff that's coming through sex ed in Common Core.
Yes, and it's getting more blatant.
Yeah. Oh, gosh, Mary. We're going to go into some articles later in the show, but talk about blatant in your face. I mean, it's just, they don't even try to hide it anymore. They don't try to hide the agenda because they figure everyone's just too busy and too apathetic to pay attention to what they're doing, when, in fact, all they're going to do is take your children and make little robots out of them.
Exactly. And I, if I may digress back to a point we were on just a few moments ago, when we were suggesting how people can help with this situation. We have several schools coming to us this year at FPE that are using our program and just interested, caring, wonderful adults who are willing to get into the problem and find a solution. They volunteered to supervise students who were using our program. And we are, this will be our second time to work with such a situation. But I recommend that. We will enroll students that in such a situation. So I just wanted to toss that out as a thought. If you don't want to find teachers and all of that, you're a mom, a dad, and I don't say that lightly, that really are a grandma or a grandpa that want to do something. Offer to supervise your children in a program like ours and make sure that they get a good education. And your love, support, participation may make such a difference in their lives.
Absolutely. And see, this is what we're trying to encourage. Just because you're a grandparent doesn't mean you have to sit back and do nothing. I mean, even businesses, Angela and I were talking about if businesses, get people together that would support a school and not corporations. We're not looking to corporatocratize our children. Let's get, maybe a couple businesses that would be willing to put, a couple hundred, sponsor a student, that they could be homeschooled. Set up little co-ops. I mean, this is so easy. We need a mass exodus out of this government indoctrination system. The only way we're going to save our future generations, if we have any chance of saving America, it's through our future generations. And it's through education. Why do you think they, with their sick UN Agenda 21 agenda, because all of this comes out of the United Nations, it's nothing that we created here. It's an agenda. It's a new world order agenda. Why do you think they've got this the way they've got it, going after the education system? Because they know that that's the end to changing a society. And we've got to stop it. We cannot allow them to use our children as pawns. So it's really important that we step up and rescue and think of creative ways to do it. Mary, tell them how they can reach you and how they can get involved with Freedom Project Education.
I would be glad to, and I would be so delighted if you would, if your listeners would look over our website and feel free to contact me by email at mblack, first initial last name, mblack at fpeusa.org. That's again mblack at FPE, as in Freedom Project Education, FPEUSA.org. I'm always delighted to hear from potential parents. I will again let you know that as of right now, our classes are filling quickly. We truly had thought that we had prepared for the proper number of students, and it looks like we didn't prepare for enough. So,
well, Mary, if you got more teachers that stepped out and stepped up, would you be able to offer more classes?
I think so. We want to be sure that we have a growth that is is supported by our enrollment. So it's always a very tricky balance. How many classes do we open? And yes, the more teachers we have, the more choice we have, the more classes we can offer. But, on the other hand, we have to think, will we have enough students to support this number of teachers? So it's a difficult, and we just sadly didn't anticipate enough. We're once again being overwhelmed.
You know, Mary, I think you're going to find that more and more as we go along, especially, with Operation Jericho pushing people that way and so on and so forth, and, us trying to get the word out, because your curriculum and what you offer is so fabulous that, because people really don't understand all the differences in the curriculum, and we're going to bring people on to explain curriculums to you and books and reading and things that you need to be aware of. So there's a lot of information going to be shared on Operation Jericho Project Radio. But I think you'll find, Mary, that, more and more, if teachers know about you, that they could actually, contact you and perhaps in some way then help you expand to a point, at a pace that, you can handle it all, but still, it would be fantastic.
Yes, we are going from 22 students just 4 years ago to already 500 students for next year, and we have 2 more months that our registration is open.
Mary, I have to just say that is phenomenal, and I'd like to point out to our listeners that this is what America was built on. This is the free market taking place right here. This is a free market solution. This is not what most people think is capitalism, which crony capitalism is what's taking over our schools. This is free market capitalism. And so maybe some of our listeners out there will go, oh, wow, what a great idea. I think I'll do the same thing, because there's a need.
There is a need. I would be remiss if I didn't let everybody know how, I say how low, but if you price shop, you will realize we are quite a bargain. For a full year student, we charge $1,600 for the entire year.
That's so amazing and so reasonable, really, to get your child an actual classical education, a real classical education, not a buzzword classical. And
and also, I just want to share with you.
Let me tell you, homeschoolers are being received much, much better than kids coming out of public school. So don't let people tell you, oh, your kid won't assimilate. Mary, tell them a little bit about that, too, of how you find that children that are homeschooled respond in, social issues, social situations, and because they always say homeschooled children aren't socialized. They don't this and they don't that. When, in fact, that's not the case at all. As a matter of fact, yesterday we heard from one of our Operation Jericho team members that what just happened with her homeschool daughter and how she got these free rides to 2 law colleges, scholarships because she so excelled. So,
when people ask me about, aren't your students unsocialized, I have to chuckle, not with disrespect, but just chuckle, because if anything, I spend time daily rather unsocializing our children in some situations, to get down to the serious business of education. They are not reluctant to be with one another, not reluctant to communicate, are very open to friendships, even the little ones. It's incredible.
Yeah, and they think that kids, they don't get socialized. They're just stuck at home with mom. No, they're not.
Yeah.
They go out and you can arrange get-together with other kids that are homeschooled. I mean, there are all kinds of boys and girls clubs you can get your kids to. There's no excuse not to socialize your child. And that has nothing. Yeah, but it's an excelling education for your child. That's really going to happen. They're actually going to know something when they get a degree.
Yes, and I find that our students, who are at home, are involved in an incredible array of activities. It is amazing. I have some students who are equestrians, some who study ballet. The boys are in this any kind of sport you would care to name. It is, Eagle Scouts, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. I have an opinion, but there are things out there, and our parents seem to be finding them, and as well, our students boast that they have friends all over the country, and they do.
Well, see, and it's a fallacy. It's another lie. Just like these states, everyone's going, oh, Indiana, and Mary will attest to this. Indiana got out of Common Core. South Carolina got out of Common Core. This one did. Oh, Common Core is not federally led. Oh, it's not in your, they're all lies. And that's what we're here to expose is the lies and bring you the hardcore truth so that you'll understand what's really happening and what your options are, because the government's going to continue to lie to you because they have an agenda.
Right, absolutely. We had a real disaster with Common Core legislation here in Indiana. And we had a great piece of legislation that truly would have stopped Common Core, that said that relinquished the waiver money for No Child Left Behind. And by the time State Senator Scott Schneider wrote it, and by the time it worked through the legislative process, the bill was so drastically changed that Senator Schneider withdrew his support of the bill. I later found out in investigating that the representative, the state representative on the Education Committee here in Indiana, received campaign money from David Coleman, who wrote the Common Core standards, English language arts Common Core standards. He was given a position on the state board as, I believe it is, senior vice president. And talk about a setup.
Wow. Yeah, and see, Mary, and they're going, look at them. They got out of Common Core. Really?
Yes, and we have a giant data mining here in Indiana. That's supported by our Governor Pence, who got us out of Common Core. We have the federal government breathing down our neck because we no longer comply with the waiver from No Child Left Behind.
Angela, you want to comment?
I just wanted to share with Mary that don't feel bad in Indiana. We had the same thing happen in Georgia, and imagine any state that is going through this and finding the same situation. But in Georgia, our Common Core withdrawal bill became nothing of the sort when it was reintroduced in 2014. And it was all a big smoke screen. It was all a big lie. It wasn't going to get us out of Common Core at all. And so this is just what we have to understand. Common Core is here to stay. We can pass legislation like they did in Oklahoma that says no more Common Core. We're going to develop our own standards. But guess what? You're going to get anyway. You're going to get more of the Common Core standards. It'll just be called Oklahoma.
And what did Mary Fallon say? Remember, don't forget Mike Huckabee, who was the president of the Governors Association when all this Common Core was brought in, and Mary Fallon's now the president. And Huckabee that just had that private, behind closed doors meeting with all the governors, telling them, don't get rid of Common Core, just rebrand it, but don't get rid of it. Well, that's what they're doing, and they're coming out to you saying, we got rid of Common Core. We're going to make our own rigorous standards. Why are you
aligned to college and career readiness? Don't forget, they're going to align them to college and career readiness, which is what Common Core was.
Which is what Common Core is. But people are being deceived. I can't tell you how many times I hear, oh, Oklahoma got out of Common Core, Indiana got out of Common Core, South Carolina. No, they didn't. No, they didn't. It's a smokescreen. It's another lie, which is why we've come to the point where we no longer are going to try to save this the public school system through legislation or whatever. We need to rescue our children and get them out of the indoctrination system. And that's what we're all about. That's what Freedom Project Education is about. That's what Operation Jericho Project is about.
And on that note, sorrowfully, I must leave you ladies and get to a meeting. They're beeping and buzzing and saying, please come.
Thanks.
Mary, do you want to give out your website real quick before you go?
Yes. It's www.fpeusa.org. www.fpeusa.org. And I encourage you, don't be bashful about emailing me. I will be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Oh, Mary, thank you so much for coming on and sharing. And we're going to have you on a lot more to talk about, Freedom Project Education and keep us updated on what's going on. So thank you so much. I know you got to run to your meeting. So God bless, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you both, ladies, and it was an honor to be a part of your first broadcast.
Well, sorry we had some technical issues in the beginning, but we got her done, as Carl says. So God bless, Mary, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary.
She's gone now.
Christine, I made some notes, and I just wanted to make sure that parents understand that they cannot be deceived by online learning courses that are offered by the state. This is part of the school choice initiatives that are deceiving. What Freedom Project Education offers is a free market, private education solution with good curriculum put together by people who know what good education is. But in most states, online learning through the state education system is available for free for parents who want to put their child in front of a computer for all their learning. And unfortunately, I just want to make sure parents understand, don't fall for that trap. That's Common Core. That's your state performance standards. And I'll give you an example in the state of Georgia. A 30-year teacher, English teacher, thought she would take a look at the English grammar instruction on the Georgia's online K-12 Cyber Academy. What she discovered on the very first click, the very first page, was so many errors in the instruction of grammar that her statement was to me was, I was just so sick about it, I just closed it and couldn't go on and look any further. And so parents, don't be deceived with online learning courses that are, quote, free.
Yeah, they'll tell you in relation to that, Angela. I just had that grandmother call me, and she says, well, I'm going to homeschool. She says, I'm going to do it through the school. So they'll tell you you can homeschool, sure, and they'll give you the means to do it. But you're going to be doing Common Core. You're going to be required to do the assessments and all the testing.
And I'll tell you another thing that is so horrendous. What the American Legislative Exchange Council is promoting through model legislation, and it's already passed in Georgia, is a mandate that every student in high school must take at least one online course. And it just starts with one right now, and I'm not sure if that's one a year or one for their high school lifetime. But it's a mandate from the state now that every student has to take an online course, and even if the course is offered in the brick and mortar, they take it online. But here's the catch. It must be a state-approved online course. The parents' authority is being usurped with this because it is just going to be a forced indoctrination of our children.
Now, bear in mind, listeners, this is, again, corporations. What Angela's talking about is corporations setting the rules for your children. A corporation, Alec, is made up of nothing but corporations. It's a corporatocracy in and of itself. And that's what they want to do.
And it'll be the online learning that I just described to you with inaccurate instruction, and it'll be the Common Core indoctrination. And your local school district, school board members, your local school district is going to pay in Georgia $250 per student per course. And part of the legislation, which, by the way, is SB 289, passed in 2012 in Georgia, but if you're listening in other states, check your legislation to make sure, because you've already passed it as well, I'm sure. But the mandate, the legislation says, and if a student wants to take their entire course curriculum online, the school boards have to let them do that, and the school is going to pay the school district will pay $250 per student per course for them to do that, even though all these courses. So what we see is the end game goal, and that is to get all of our children on the computer for all their learning. In fact, the school superintendents are proudly stating that the idea is to get rid of that, they call it now, the sage on the stage. No more educated in their field of teaching, teacher in the classroom. Every child will be on the computer learning. And there will only be classroom facilitators.
That's right.
Low-income, low-paid facilitators that will just make sure the child can boot up their computer.
And see, that's another thing, Angela, that we haven't gone into. We have so much to talk about, but that's another thing is teachers. Teachers do not realize their days are numbered, because once this all gets implemented, this agenda, the way they have it designed, you no longer need teachers. You need just what Angela said, facilitators. You'll have technical assistants to sit there and make sure your kid can power up a computer. And that'll be pretty much it, because there is no more education, so you don't need a teacher. And most parents don't even understand it.
And
teachers don't even realize that this is coming.
No, teachers right now are concerned that their pay increases and their future employment are on the line with these assessments, and they're upset about that. But they don't realize that they can't win at this game if we don't stop it. If we don't break this government hold on our schools, we're not going to win this game, and they will be out of a job. You know, while we're sitting here on this radio show talking about moving our children out, I'm sure the teachers are out there panicking, oh, no, don't make me lose my job. But look, your job is on the line. If you're not willing to teach the indoctrination that you're going to see coming, and we're going to talk more about this curriculum, next generation of science standards is going to make the top of your head blow off. But if you're not going to be willing to teach it, your days are numbered. And so, you know, you're going to have some moral choices you're going to have to make here. So the sage on the stage is be gone. Replaced with classroom facilitators. And now most teachers and parents are familiar with the individualized education program. What they don't realize is that's not about addressing just special needs. That's about assigning career pathways to our children starting in kindergarten. And we've already passed the law in Georgia starting next year in kindergarten. A career pathway will be assigned to your child. In kindergarten, it's not parents saying, oh, I want my child to be a doctor or a lawyer or an Indian chief. It is about the state assigning the career pathway for your child. And how can you have every child in our nation with an individualized education program? You have to do it online.
And parents, you're going to be amazed at what's going to come through that computer to your child that you're going to have no idea. And as Angela touched on it, we're going to get into all of this in our future shows, because we want you, the only way you're going to find out is if somebody will actually be willing to step up and tell you the truth. And so that's all that we're going to do here, is tell you the truth. And we hope that, it reaches deep into your spirit, because this is your child we're talking about. And it's going to get – go ahead, Angela.
Oh, it's going to get worse. It's going to get worse, but I do want to remind everybody that if they visit OperationJerichoProject.com, we've laid out all this information on our website. You're going to learn who's in control of the education of your child, and you're going to be stunned to learn that it's not even your state Board of Education or our federal Department of Education. It is the United Nations. It is UNESCO. It's the Muslim Brotherhood. It is GLSEN, which is a gay and lesbian straight education network. It is a lot of nefarious characters that you don't even know are controlling what your child are learning. So find that at our website, but you'll also find the information on the curriculum. Everything we've talked about so far, we've tried to lay it out on the website. And, we're also going to get into the data collecting. Mary touched on that.
Yeah.
The data mining of your children.
That's a very big deal. And understand these companies that are doing all this data mining and these testing, they're only in it for the money. It has nothing to do with seeing where your child is and so we can have better education. They're going to be making anywhere from $15 to $30 per student. Well, actually, it could go up to a couple hundred per student. They'll get paid for each and every test. Think of how many students are in school. And these businesses, these corporations, are going to get paid.
Oh, and remember, Christina, these aren't really tests anymore. They're assessments of your child's values. And
right.
So a lot of parents became aware of data mining when Common Core rose its ugly head because our states agreed to set up the longitudinal data system to collect data through these Common Core assessments. But when we started doing our research, what we discovered was this was not anything new. This has been going on for decades, collecting information on every American citizen in the government school system. Every program in our schools that takes a single federal dollar, and that's everything from your sex education, your drug ed, alcohol ed, health education, even death education, dropout prevention programs, your free lunch programs. Every federally funded program requires our state to collect data on our children and turn it over to the federal government.
And like
that's
I
been
said,
going on for decades.
Right. It's not about better education. That's not what the data is for. They're going to be asking questions like, what church do your parents go to? Do your parents have a gun at home? Everywhere you go now. As a matter of fact, I was reading where if you make a doctor's appointment for your child and you don't keep it, it's mandatory that the doctor's appointment report you. The doctor's office report you for not keeping that doctor's appointment.
Oh, it's about taking our children starting at birth. And in fact, the National School Board Association puts out a report, and they promote the state taking our children at birth. And here's their quote: "Because the parent is either incapable or unwilling to give the child the education they need to prepare them for kindergarten." Mm-hmm. So parents just think about that statement. I have in my hand, Christina, something that just came to light to me the other day, and it's a federal program called Positive Behavior Intervention and Support. And so when your state legislator tells you we're not collecting private data and sharing it with anybody, call them out on it. It's a lie. They are collecting private data, and here's some of the questions that they ask our children, as if our children don't have Fifth Amendment rights once they enter the school building. They're asking our children questions about illegal activities, including do you drink alcohol? Do you use drugs? Do you smoke marijuana? Are you a member of a gang? Do your parents have a gun in their home? What is your political affiliation? These are the kind of questions they're asking through this program called Positive Behavior Intervention and Support. And if you think that your school doesn't participate in that, you can visit the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services website. And we have all this information on Operation Jericho website. But you visit that website and you can print out your local school's report of how your children answer those questions. Have you ever brought a gun to school? This is a question that we're asking our children. Parents, you'll be stunned to learn that about 10% of the students asked have brought a gun to school. And you're sending your children to these schools, not only for the data mining, but consider the risk that you're putting them in. What do you think, Christina?
Well, we were talking about that. We went on air. As this the type of environment you want for your child? You know, Angela, share that story you were sharing when we were off air about the along this subject line. It was about the school shooter in, was it Oregon or?
Well, actually, yeah. We're going to share some news headlines with you on every show, and this because these news headlines tell the story. And when you visit Operation Jericho, OperationJerichoProject.com, and you click on Learn About Public School Education, you scroll down on the left, you can click on News Stories, Reveal the Truth. And at the top of the news stories list, day before yesterday, apparently there was another school shooting in Oregon. A young high school freshman came into the school with a shotgun and shot a teacher. She's now dead, unfortunately, and injured another student. You know, it's unfortunate that these things happen. We're hearing more and more of this. I'm not sure what's going on with our children. Maybe it's the death education courses that our federal government is paying for. In fact, we have a video on our website from a news program that kind of indicated that death education is taking away all of our children's morals and value of life that may be leading to some of these things. That's another story in itself. But another story in the same newspaper is in Lynchburg, Virginia, where I was yesterday. The newspaper headline was, School Resource Officers Return to Lynchburg Middle School. And so we're spending an awful lot of our tax dollars to put police officers into our schools. And as we learned from the Oregon school shooting, there were police officers in that school. The story tells us there were, but they were not able to protect our children. So that is not the answer. Probably removing your children from these dangerous situations of no school, no gun zones is probably the only safe thing to do right now.
Well, even, look at Sandy Hook as an example. We also have a video up that on our OperationJerichoProject.com. It's under videos, but it's also featured on for parents, under the tab for parents. But it shows a lot of the things that are really going on in the schools and where the kids' minds are. We've got a lot of classes that are bringing in gay, homosexual instructors to talk to the children about how great homosexuality is. And they do this in elementary, to kindergarten and elementary kids. This administration, we've talked a lot about the legislatures, and we've talked about ALEC, and we've talked about, a lot of different things. But what about this administration? This current administration that we have is the most evil and insidious against our children, because they are pushing this. They're the ones that want the children from birth, and they're pushing Common Core for babies now. So we have to realize, So while we're
go ahead, Christine.
Well, while we're focusing on all the things that we're focusing on, we have to realize that they're in the background doing this at breakneck speed to take over your children, and they want them from birth. You've got to realize, in order to change the society, because as Angela and I both said, this comes right out of the United Nations. It's the New World Order, global governance. And that's what they want to make your children, good, global, manageable, sustainable citizens that can be controlled and don't have a mind of their own. They will only.
And parents out there may say, they're not taking my child at birth. Well, you know what? Don't be so quick to say that can't happen. Because in Scotland, they have passed legislation already assigning a social worker to every child in Scotland. And what happens in Europe, it usually doesn't take it long to get to America. But we are already seeing our governors in our states accepting federal dollars for early childhood intervention programs. And this is about taking children at the very earliest ages in order to help the child better learn what they need to know under the government indoctrination system.
Because
and of course,
parents aren't qualified. Parents are no longer qualified to raise their own children. And we're seeing it raise its ugly head here in the United States more and more as we become more socialized. Because we're no longer a democratic republic. We're bordering on tyranny here. So we've got to really rescue our children if we have, any hope of rescuing our nation. And, speaking of articles, Angela, look at the one that came out in California. We talk about sex ed and Common Core. And a lot of this stuff now comes through the Health and Human Services Department. So when people say, well, I didn't see anything about that on the Department of Ed, it's a very convoluted. It's not just the Department of Ed that's involved in this.
Oh, listen, Christina, we know Obamacare is involved in it now.
Obamacare, exactly, and Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, Obamacare gave Planned Parenthood $55 billion to teach our children sex ed starting in kindergarten.
And abortion and encouraging them to have sex and babies. I mean, this is what's happening through Planned Parenthood. So we've got to realize we've got, a very evil agenda stacked against these kids. And don't send your kids into school thinking, if you're a Christian parent, well, my child will be the light. They'll be the salt and the light. They can't. They are not equipped. It takes an adult to stand in the gap for the child. Don't send your child in there expecting your child to be able to stand against the onslaught of the evil that's going to be facing them, because they're not going to know what to do. I was talking to one person, and she was telling me her 17-year-old came home from school and looked at her and said, "You're a murderer." And she goes, "What? What are you talking about?" She says, "You're a murderer. You're murdering Mother Earth. Because you have to have a home, you have to have property, and you have to have this, and we're killing the planet." This is what they're being indoctrinated with.
Oh, and you know what, Christina, it's not the teachers necessarily doing this. They have online programs. They will put our youngest children in front of a computer to be indoctrinated into this, and the teachers may not even know what these children, the parents certainly don't know until the child comes home and accuses them of exactly what you said, or calling their parent or grandparent evil because they're driving a fossil fuel automobile. This is what
or,
the
as
children
we
are
said
learning
earlier, the teacher has an agenda. Because there's another story that came from this same person was her two 13-year-olds were watching a movie on slavery in the classroom. Now, it must have obviously been a very slanted version of slavery, because when it was all over, and this is a predominantly black and Hispanic area, she told me, and they're white, so they're being discriminated against. They're reverse racism right now. And anyway, so as soon as the movie was over, all the kids in the classroom looked at the two girls who were white and said, "You did this. Your people did this. Let's get her. Get them." And they went after those two kids and knocked them down and started pushing them and bullying them, and the teacher sat there and did nothing. And when the parent went to the school and complained, they said, "Well, we're sorry that, but blah, their typical excuses. Nowadays, everything's, an excuse." Just like I started to tell you earlier about the sex ed program. We talk about Common Core, sex ed, death ed, all this. Well, now they're putting out, here in California, in a San Diego area middle school called Pine Valley Middle School, 8th graders. This is sex education. First of all, it's not the school's job to do sex education for children. That's not the school's job. But nonetheless, so what did they want to do? They wanted to give the children top conception myths. Myths on conception to 8th graders. I don't really realize that this is for 8th grades, but anyway, one of the photos accompanying the slideshow was a young man with the caption, "douchebag." Another photo shows a man on all fours with a woman standing on top of him. The caption reads, "Girl on top can still get pregnant." And the one that enraged the parents the most on conception myths showed a picture of a man with blood on his face. The caption for that picture read, "A real man loves his woman every day of the month." Now use your imagination, listeners. And don't think that your children don't know this, because once we get into the books that are being given to your children now through school and their libraries, and what's going to be online, they already know this. They know exactly. They're talking about oral sex. And here's a graphic picture.
And, Christina, what is interesting is most parents just assume that our schools are teaching them the values that a Christian parent would want their youngest child. We're talking about it's starting in kindergarten, but it's been going on in the 5th grade program for years. So we haven't been teaching our children abstinence, the Christian principle of waiting till you're married. And parents assume they're teaching abstinence or, teaching the birds and the bees is how babies are made, and so don't have sex until you get married. No, that is not the case. We're teaching our children how to have safe sex without suffering the consequences of pregnancy or STDs. But if you do happen to get pregnant, you can come to school, tell us, and we'll take you to the abortion clinic, and your parents will never know.
That's right.
These are laws on the books in this.
Exactly, and this is all designed to tear down the moral fabric of the United States and get God out, bring in evolution, Mother Earth worship, pantheism, all of these agendas, these global agendas, the New World Order, coming out of the United Nations. And, Angela, we just have a few minutes left, so we got about 5 minutes left. So let's kind of give everyone a little close-up, wrap-up here, and to be continued. We got a lot of shows.
We have a lot to talk about, and when you visit our website, OperationJerichoProject.com, explore the website. Check it out for yourself. We have documented evidence. We don't just say these things without documented evidence. We have the videos. We have the reports. We have the laws that have been passed. We don't say things without documenting the evidence. And we just hope and we pray that our parents will review this information, protect their children. Consider prayerfully removing your children from the education system of the government and seek an alternative. Whatever you have to do. Do you have to sacrifice financially? Do you have to sacrifice time? Do you have to maybe give up your expensive cable TV package, downsize your cars? Maybe, you put your children into a church softball league instead of the thousands of dollars on community rec leagues that you're spending. Whatever it takes to rescue your children out of the system, please consider it, because your children, their values are being changed. And we have now a president in our White House who was elected by young people who have been through the indoctrination system, because, as we've said, this is not new. Your children's values will be changed. So I'll just end, my comments with, please come back and join us every week, every Thursday. Check out our website. And if you miss our show live, it is going to be archived at Blog Talk Radio. And thank you so much for joining us for our first show.
Yes, and what Angela was just saying, this is something that is so important, especially, Christian parents. What are your kids doing in these indoctrination systems? You've got to realize this is not what God called us to do. God called us to educate our children. It is our responsibility, and sadly, our churches have abdicated their responsibility, and this is why our country is in such a moral decline. And we've really got to get back to that. So I encourage you all to contact us at OperationJerichoProject.com. Reach out to us. Let us help you get something going in your area. Let us join with your pastors, your leaders, your businesses, whatever. It only takes a little bit to sponsor a kid. Look at Mary's thing. It's $1,600 a year. That's, if each business put up $100. If each person sponsored a child, there's so much you can do, and we've got to do things to help working parents to facilitate. Churches need to open their doors during the week like we used to do, like our nation started. That schoolhouse was a schoolhouse all week and a church on Sunday. That's what we've got to get back to, community-based. And I'm not talking the buzzword community like the government's talking about. They want to make these community hubs. Well, what they want to do is control you. You're going to have mass transportation. We'll get into all of that later. But this is something that we have got to take back. As Angela said, free market. We've got to take it back. We have to take our country back, and we have to take our kids back. And we have to. The only way we can do it is break the back of this government education system. Pull your kids out so we have something to start over with. Let's give them a proper education. And don't let the government in this agenda take over our children and our nation. So with that, we just encourage you all, again, to join us at OperationJerichoProject.com. Contact us and reach out to us. We're happy to help you in any way. And we'll be here every Thursday bringing you, hard-hitting things and information that really you need to know in order to make educated decisions. And like Angela said, please prayerfully seek the Lord as to what you need to do for your child to do God's will. And I'll leave you all with that. So God bless everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for our first broadcast of Operation Jericho Project Radio. See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.